Yo, what is going on? Welcome back to the channel. A little out of practice with these videos. It's been a couple months, but I'm starting to get back into the swing of things. And today we're just doing a quick kind of what I've been carrying, what I've been liking, and a couple small overviews really fast as well, because I've got a couple models here that I have not done any videos on yet. So without any further ado, this is kind of what I have been carrying most recently. I usually go with a little two knife setup. I like to carry something a little on the bigger side or uh, things that I want to use just myself. And then in this little slip here, I'll usually put something smaller, cheaper, or just, less imposing if I'm carrying something big to pull out if I need something in public or heaven forbid, I'm going to lend somebody a knife to use. So luckily, I don't have to worry too much about the people that I work with and stuff when it comes to knife use. But you never know what's going to happen. So I try not to let people use my knives usually, but having something smaller, um, especially like a little button lock like this, that's easy to actuate and safe for most people is going to be, handy to have. So let's start with probably my favorite recently, and you've probably seen a lot of these around or a lot of videos and or posts about these, but I really can't say enough good things about the Winterblade Factor. As you can see, I haven't cleaned it up since the last time I used it, and this is a knife that I do use consistently. Not only do I love just playing with it because the flick, both hands, and that flip lever is just, it's beautiful. I love the sound. I love how it feels. It does have a bit of a different feel from most other knives due to having that magnetic detent. You don't have to worry about any sort of bounce back, and it just feels solid. I did upgrade this with some skiff bearings, and while the difference isn't insane, it is very noticeably smoother with the skiff bearings, especially if you're holding back the lock here so that the blade is just free. It feels glassier. The other bearings were smooth, but you could feel a little bit of grit here and there, and that was even after completely cleaning the knife out. I have swapped out for the heavier detent in that, and have been really enjoying that. If you're going for a very hard use knife, it's not necessarily the best because that little gap does create a little bit of a hot spot in the hand, but you can choke up a little bit and it's not too bad. And then I don't know if or when they're going to be available, but supposedly Brian is releasing carbon fiber and or G10 backspacers that will get rid of that functionality, but provide you a little bit more of a seamless back to the knife. So looking forward to seeing about those. I might look into making some of those myself um, once I really get back into the scale stuff that I've been working on. A little preview here. Some homemade materials and CNC. I'm hoping to make some of my own custom scales for at least the clip side of these guys. Probably won't be getting into too much in the way of replacing that titanium scale for a while, but we'll have to see on that. The next one, definitely my PM2. This one is a little bit of a Franken PM2. I took an S90V blade and put it on what had been the tan G10 scales from my 20CV version. So I do have the blacked out hardware and liners, which I really like with this blacked out blade. And then a MXG deep carry that I entropy finished with the ferric chloride quench, just for that little extra pop of color. I love this. It's sort of understated with all black, but that nice pop of color on the clip, I love it. And I love how this clip came out. This was one of my favorite little projects to put together. The next knife is one that I have not actually reviewed yet, and that is the Vosteed Valkyrie. This has been an awesome, fidgety, fun little knife. I went with the modified sax blade that they released, and I liked that because it's, nice and pointy. It also does have that flatter edge, and it makes it easy to get that point down into things for cutting tape and stuff like that. I'll probably do a little bit longer of a video on this one at some point here soon. This one is a little bit just of an overview, but this has plenty of deployment options. It's got both some thumb studs for a reverse and a normal thumb flick. It's got the flipper tab, it's got the front flipper tab, and it's a button lock. So definitely a fidgety little fella. One thing that I do really like is this pocket clip that they've put on here. Even though the ergos are extremely neutral on this handle for the most part, which with some knives can produce quite a bit of hot spotting due to the pocket clip. This one you cannot feel at all. It is so slim and just low profile, and it does actually grip really well into the pocket as well. This is a knife that I'm never afraid of losing. So like I said, ergos are definitely nice and neutral. It feels good in the hand. There's a bit of a choil up here, although with how shallow this is, it is real easy to ride up onto the edge or the heel edge right there. And you're not getting a ton of sharpening life out of this without starting to smile up that sort of sweeping plunge grind right there. But overall, this is a good knife so far. G10 handles, if you couldn't tell, and this is a 154 cm blade. And I've been really enjoying this for sort of a utility fidgeter. One thing to note, and I don't know if this is prevalent with the other, at least one knife that I know of with this lock design. This is the Trek lock, if I'm not mistaken, and it's not quite your typical button lock, which is what lets them get away with a front flipper and a rear flipper and thumb studs on a button lock knife. And that button actually goes through a circular slot that's on the blade, and this button screws into itself. And so I did have one time when I was messing around, I did have this button pop off because as I was actuating the button, the knife would twist a little bit and I was slowly unscrewing that button. So I don't know. The other knife that I know that has that lock is the Kizer Cormorant, and I haven't seen any mention of issues like that. But one fix to that is going to be just like a little tiny bit of blue Loctite on those threads, and that should keep it all together. We will move on to the next. I've done a video on this one, but this is still one of my favorite, especially kind of lightweight carries. This knife comes in at 2.5 ounces for actually the largest knife out of all of these group, or all of this group. This is the Acta non-Verba A100. This is LMAX steel with some basically FRN handles. They're very bug outy in terms of feel, but this is a fun little knife. The LMAX sharpens up absolutely laser sharp and holds an edge pretty well. I've accidentally banged the edge onto some steel on the back patio there while cutting some zip ties one time, and barely had a tiny little roll on the edge. So this guy is definitely a performer. Even though the FRN feels a little bendy, I've never really had any issues with this knife using it in a little harder use settings. That being said, I haven't put it through what you might put it through if you were using this as a job knife, as a construction worker or something like that, doing roofing or something along those lines, where you may be using your knife for less ideal purposes if you're having issues with your razor or something like that. But this is a really good user, and I just like the lines and the aesthetic on this. Wire clip is nice and low profile and gives a super deep carry. The entire knife disappears into your pocket when you've got this type of really looped over wire clip like this. Holds on fairly well. The handles do flex enough that the tension on this can throw off the centering a little bit, but I haven't really had any major issues with centering in this once I adjusted the pocket clip a little bit. It did used to rub on this clip side scale when I first got it, but this has been a fantastic knife. One thing that I do wish I hadn't accidentally done was strip out this screw. I would love to have swapped for a dual side thumb stud on this. That is one thing that keeps me from carrying this more often, is I love doing the little reverse flick, and you can't do that with this guy. So other than that, definitely one of my favorites and one of my most consistent carries. Next up is one of the most surprising knives I have ever handled to this date, and that is the Sencut Watauga. This whole build right here was, when I purchased it, about $60 total. This is such an insanely good budget deal of a knife because it's D2 steel, so you're going to get something, while relatively tough to sharpen, very long lasting. So if you can sharpen it once and just keep it nice and stropped up, it will last quite a while. It's a higher carbide steel or a larger carbide steel, so you can have issues with chipping on the edge, but it is nice and hard. And if you're not going to be doing too much in the way of banging it against other metals or against concrete or something like that, it's going to last you. I mean, if you're mainly just cutting boxes and whatnot, you're good to go. This was an instant purchase for me. For quite a while, I had a flipper fuller button lock combination on my list of knife styles that I wanted to have, and I love a Wharncliffe style blade. There's just something about that non-recurved sort of hawk talon look to a Wharncliffe that I just love. And so when I saw this knife, I had seen it in, I think, a Knives video, and it was an instant purchase for me. I bought the Jade G10 handle version, and I did this dye job myself, this sort of ombre green to black, which I was super happy with how that came out. And then I got one of the Civivi titanium clips and anodized that up green. I also did, with the Civivi clips, you do get titanium screws as well. So I was able to anodize those too, but as you can see, I didn't quite get the same color. Now, the main reason for that is I didn't do all of the screws at the same time. I did them one at a time, and I did it with a 9-volt setup. I was just kind of guessing. So that is one thing that I'll probably change in the future with this knife, is just evening out the anode color on those screws. But I love this all green style, and what really makes this knife such a great budget value is the action. This has one of the nicest bearing actions I've ever felt, and that's even compared to the skiffs in this Factor. I don't know if it's just because I got a good set of bearings in this particular model, or if that's something that's been consistent across this model line, but it's so glassy smooth and it feels so good to use. I have this pivot tightened down probably a little tighter than I would normally because it still functions just fine, and that extra tightness almost gives it that like washer-like hydraulic feel. So it definitely falls shut, but it feels controlled, and it feels solid when it opens, and it feels solid when it finally slams shut. So these 5 have been really my top 5 primary carry knives. And I do have a Hogue Deca and Magna Cut as well that I've been carrying, but I didn't bring that out. That one is probably the least carried of the top 6 that I usually keep in my drawer. So those are my primary carries. And then these 3 plus kind of the Kizer mini beg lighter that's in the slip right now, these 3 are really my main secondary carries. The Kizer original right here is one that it's kind of on that border between what I'd consider a secondary knife and a primary, because it's a good usable 4-finger size. We can actually start with that guy. And for a lot of people, this would be plenty for a primary, main carry. But I like a little bit larger myself. But this is one of the better button knives or button lock knives that I've ever tried. The cartridge liner in there is really tiny because you have the full aluminum handle scales, nice and stiff. It really gives a premium feel to the knife. And I do really like the acoustics that this knife brings as well. There's a slightly different sound between the reverse flick, the front flick, and just using the button to actuate it. I will say that this one could be a little smoother on the bearing action. It's not gritty and it's not bumpy, but it doesn't feel quite as glassy as like the Watauga or the skiffs in the Factor. But it's just a snappy little knife, full flat ground 154 cm blade, and this pretty what's the word I'm looking for? This traditional sort of drop point look gives it a nice sleek feel. One thing that I'm not a huge fan of on the Kizers is the pocket clip. It's one of those ones that you can definitely feel. It's not really a hot spot if I'm really bearing down on the knife, but you feel it in your hand versus something that's super low profile like the Vosteed clip. Somebody honking the horn outside. But yeah, this is a great little knife, and it fits into my little slip just perfectly. So when I want to take that as that little backup, that's an awesome one. The other one that I really like is my Civivi McKenna. This is the copper handled version that I did a little shipwreck patina on, and this is a super snappy little front flipper. You definitely can't really use the blade hole there for much more than like a pinch opening, but you really don't need to, because the front flipper on this knife is incredible, if I'm being honest. It works perfectly with the thumb, and it's nice to do with the forefinger as well. A little harder to do with the side of the finger, but that's also because I don't really practice that too much. But this is a nice little design, and it's almost weird enough to be extremely non-threatening to people who may not be used to having knives out around them. So I do like carrying this one as that little backup knife because it looks nice, and more people are going to be intrigued by it than freaked out by it. So I can definitely recommend this one. It is running on bearings. I'm sure you could probably swap those out with some skiffs, but it is plenty smooth with the stock bearings. You can drop and then shake it shut, and part of the reason why you'll probably always have to shake this knife shut is just how light the blade is. It's relatively thin stock. It's got a distal taper, and it's a full flat grind, so it is a nice little slicer. These low-end Damascus patterns from Civivi aren't the highest end steel, but it's held an edge pretty well, and it sharpens up nice and easily as well. So can definitely recommend that as a smaller knife. And then this one is, I usually only carry this one as my secondary when I'm feeling fancy or going somewhere where, I won't have to take things out of my pocket. This is the Knives Suru. This is one of the sort of special editions of the Suru. And I love this knife mainly because my girlfriend got it for me. It was a perfect little surprise gift. I had a feeling she was getting me a knife when I got this, but I didn't know that it was going to be something along this line. This is it's a nice beefy little guy. As you can see, it's got really thick blade stock. So it's not the absolute best slicer in the world, but it is a nice fat blade. So down here, you do get a good bit of slicing action while having an extremely tough tip out at the front. This is M390, and it's obviously a frame lock. One of the things that I love about this knife that really sets it off as unique is the all carbon fiber handle. The handle, even this frame here, is carbon fiber. And I've had some people ask about, is that strong? And so far, I would say yes. I don't know how this handle material, carbon fiber, holds up to something like the carbon fiber in a bike frame. But if it's any sort of, if the process to produce this stuff is any sort of similar to the process that is used to produce bike frames, I wouldn't have any issues with even using this knife, as small as it is, for some harder kind of tasks. Am I going to baton it through anything? No. It looks too nice and it's too small for that. But anything that you could think of that you might have to put a small, sub 3-inch blade knife to, like, that lock is going to hold up to what you're putting the work into. So this does have looks like they're, no, it's not really fading, but this does have titanium hardware with the bronze ano on there, including the pocket clip. The little ball in the pocket clip is actually a zirconium ball. So this is definitely one of their premium models. It was an incredible gift. I do have a little video that at least touches on this, although I have not put out a video specifically dedicated to it. And I did put a little lanyard on. My lanyard tying skills could use a little bit of work, but that with a couple of anodized titanium beads, or entropy heat finish with an anodized bead, just kind of put it together. I like having that little extra bit hanging out just to kind of fill out the palm. But this forward choil does make this very comfortable to use in a 4-finger grip and get kind of detailed with that blade. So that's just what I've been carrying most recently. I've been loving this knife collecting so far, and I'm excited to keep sharing my journey with you guys and checking things out. So thanks again for tuning in. We'll see you next time, and take care. Peace.